Hi, my name is Volma Volcy with the Ring of Democracy. The Ring of Democracy is a nonprofit organization founded in 2016, right after the Trump election. And our goal is to engage, educate, organize, and mobilize Black and Brown communities, specifically marginalized communities overall. And today we are here to have a series of conversations with candidates like yourself, Jessica Morse, who's here running for Congress in Congressional District 3. So thank you for being here, Jessica. Just giving you a quick second to introduce yourself and tell the people why you're running for office.
Thanks so much, Volma. What an honor to be here with you, and thanks for all the work that you're doing to reach out to community members. So I'm Jessica Morse, running for California's 3rd Congressional District, which includes Roseville and Lincoln and Folsom areas and all the way up to Lake Tahoe. And it's an amazing part of California. My family's been in the area for about 5 generations, and I've committed myself to public service. And it's about standing up and making sure that we're giving back and uplifting people in the community. The last few years, I've been leading the state's efforts on wildfire mitigation and resilience, making sure that we're starting to get ahead of the fire crisis so that communities aren't getting trapped and impacted by wildfires. And before that, I worked actually on national security, trying to prevent suffering and crises around the world. I've worked on everything from stopping human trafficking to countering extremism around the world so that we can actually make sure that people who are marginalized and underserved are actually having a voice. And that's what I want to do in Congress. I want to make sure that our community is heard and seen, and that we're standing up for everything from women's reproductive rights to housing to workforce development to wildfire safety, so that our communities can't just succeed but really thrive into the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, and you are running against a person, some would say, a little bit more conservative or a little bit more on the right side of things, right? So as we are, especially California, we're getting ready and moving into electrification, right? Where we want to electrify everything. We want to make sure we have an environment that that's sustainable for our children moving forward. So in the areas that you were representing, you mentioned wildfires, right? So I want to take a second here to ask you to talk to us a little bit about an environmental plan, like just to make sure the world that we're living in here is a little bit better for our children tomorrow.
Absolutely. I have a strong track record leading on environmental work. I was the Deputy Secretary at the California Natural Resources Agency, leading California's efforts on wildfire mitigation. But before I go into that, you mentioned my opponent, and I think it's really important for all your viewers to understand that my opponent, Kevin Kiley, is a MAGA extremist. He is somebody who is actually driving, he's not just a little conservative. He is somebody who is driving real extremism and an extremist ideology into our community and using our own safety to play political games. For example, he's somebody who's taken money from PG&E over the years, and when he was in the state assembly. And this year, when we saw PG&E driving up utility costs for people in the community and in the region, causing wildfires, and they even cut off the water supply to Nevada City this summer, Kevin Kiley didn't use his constitutional office to hold a hearing with PG&E. Instead, he held a hearing with school teachers from Berkeley, trying to ask them why their diversity programs were corrupting children. And so he's been playing into these extremist partisan games, into the MAGA movement, rather than actually standing up for the issues that impact us. And so I will be somebody who gets in there and is actually driving solutions for the community. I'm so proud that I was able to help secure $3 billion for wildfire mitigation funding. This includes the goats that you see grazing in Roseville, to fuel breaks around communities that have allowed for safe evacuation during fires, to home hardening and defensible space. This also included workforce development, where we actually specifically brought in funding for marginalized communities so that they could actually be put to work and get really great jobs helping thin the forests and helping create fire resilience for our community. So I will get into Congress and be a unique leader on wildfire safety because I will take the work that we've done here in California and take it to the federal level so that the federal government can start moving at a much faster pace so that when fire happens, and fire's going to happen, it's not catastrophic, that fire plays its ecological role, which is actually good for the environment, rather than these catastrophic mega fires that destroy lives, communities, and our ecosystems.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. So our next question is here. So what specific legislative action will you take to ensure reproductive rights?
Reproductive rights are vital. Even here in California, where the state constitution protects us, there's a danger that is happening at the national level because we don't have national protection for reproductive rights for women. What we are seeing in California is, like, my opponent, Kevin Kiley, is actually trying to drive a national abortion ban. He tried to block medication abortion, which covers 60% of the abortions and miscarriage treatments in California. And he tried to block that federally, which would have taken away a safe way to treat a miscarriage, even in California. And I was talking to an OBGYN at the farmer's market the other day in Roseville, and we just introduced myself, and she told me what she did. And she said that her office in Roseville is overwhelmed by women flying in from other states because they are needing treatments for abortions and miscarriages. And just the pain of that, for women having to have a miscarriage, and in that moment of pain and grief, they have to get on an airplane, come to a different state, and get treatment. And what we see is that women who don't have resources in other states to be able to do that, they are dying. And I will not sit by and let this happen. And so I will get into Congress and ensure that we codify Roe versus Wade into law so that we have national protections for reproductive freedom so that our rights as women stop ricocheting around the courts right now. We need a real champion. And my opponent is somebody that not only is he staying silent on trying to protect women's reproductive rights, he is in active danger. And so if he remains in Congress, he will continue to push against women's reproductive rights. He is somebody who's pushing a law called, he's on the Republican Study Committee, which is a very extreme group, and they're pushing a law called the Life at Conception Act that would not only ban abortion with no exemptions for rape or other traumas, but it would also ban IVF and potentially criminalize miscarriages we're seeing abortion bans doing in other states right now. So we are taking a hard line against this guy, and we need him out of Congress so that we can get me in so that I can actually help champion women.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Just to shift a little bit here, right? And we're going to talk a little bit internationally and all the craziness that's happening across our world, right? I don't know the last time I checked, but I think we had more than 50 wars happening at the very same time, right? Some of these, we Americans play a role, right? Like we have the stuff that's happening in the Middle East. We have the Ukraine wars, like some of the two biggest ones we know that's happening. So what do you think is the role of the United States of America, but more specifically, what do you think is the role of a congresswoman?
Mm-hmm. I've lived through a war zone. When I was 23 years old, I went over to Iraq with the U.S. Agency for International Development as a civilian. And I lived in that war zone for a year and a half. I stood side by side with American troops as they were deployed. I saw the impact and the weight that war had on them. I saw the impact of that war on their families when they were being deployed. And I also saw the impact the war was having on my Iraqi colleagues, because they were taking the same rocket fire and mortar fire that we were every single day, except they were going through this with their children. And the biggest lesson for me, having spent 10 years with the State Department and the Defense Department and USAID all around the world, is that conflict impacts children most dramatically. It is often the innocent who have their lives ruined. In Iraq, I got up to an area called Halabja, where Saddam Hussein had gassed the Kurds in the 80s. And the survivors of that attack, the kids who had grown up with this trauma, some of them we had helped them get scholarships so that they could start a law school, and they were wanting to be lawyers, and they wanted to be human rights lawyers. I think the role of the U.S. is to ensure that we are upholding international norms and standards, that we are protecting civilians, and most importantly, that we are preventing these crises before they start. Because once a crisis breaks out, the price is too high. And so if we can invest in tools that prevent crises, prevent conflict, prevent suffering, everything from investing in climate mitigation so that you're not having climate refugees who are having to leave their homes and communities because of climate disasters, to trying to stabilize and prevent collapses of stable governments and stopping the rise of authoritarianism and extremism around the world, it's really vital. But the U.S. is not going to be effective at stopping the rise of extremism around the world if we can't stop the rise of extremism here. The MAGA movement is an authoritarian movement that is trying to otherize and marginalize people in our community. It creates danger here at home. When I worked on countering extremism, we tried to create jobs and opportunities for people so that they wouldn't be sucked into an extremist and violent ideology. And what I saw is that people were converted to extremism around the world when you had a local, trusted voice that normalized the hatred. Kevin Kiley in our community is described by Donald Trump as a MAGA champion. He brought Jim Jordan out here, and he is somebody who is normalizing the extremist ideology and the hatred in our community. He has helped support get Moms for Liberty candidates onto local school boards. They are an extension of the Proud Boys. And he is somebody who has applauded them, in turn, for banning books and promoting homophobia and transphobia in our community that causes marginalized people in our district and in our community to feel scared and afraid of their neighbors. And so if we want to stop extremism around the world, it starts here at home. And so I want to be able to ensure that we unseat Kiley at the ballot box so that we can get a voice that is promoting healing here locally and promoting community and promoting understanding and strengthening our community rather than somebody who is otherizing and making life more dangerous for members of our community.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jessica. So as we are getting to the end of our talk here, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk directly to the voters and let them know exactly why you believe that you are the strongest person to represent them in the California Congressional District 3, and why you will make the strongest congresswoman for us all.
Yeah, the issues we're facing here in the greater Sierra and the foothill communities, they're not partisan. Right? A wildfire isn't asking if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat based on your housing. And what we need is an advocate who's going to stop playing political games with our lives and safety, but instead step up and actually help solve this. I will be a champion for you. I will be your partner. I will be your listener. I will make sure that we are strengthening our community. And I will find practical solutions to the issues we're facing. Whether it is unattainable fire insurance, I will be driving fire insurance reform so that you can afford to live here. I will be investing in housing solutions at scale so that we don't have, I met a working mom the other day who is working 2 jobs and is living out of her car in Nevada City. And so I need to be her champion, right? I met a young woman the other day who was abused by a relative when she was starting at age 12 and needed an abortion. And I will be her champion. I met a mom the other day whose son had a schizophrenic break and ended up on the streets, and it took her months to find him because he kept getting displaced by local laws, and rather than actually creating mental health treatment and support, I will be her champion. And I will be your champion to make sure that you can have jobs, clean air, clean water, be safe from fires, lower your fire insurance, find access to housing, and make sure that we are creating good paying jobs that provide health care and support so that you can work to support your family with dignity. So I would be honored to be your champion, and we need to make sure that we are driving the change, and we can only do that change when you vote. Because if you don't vote, Kevin Kiley wins and MAGA extremism wins. And when you do vote, we can actually bring in a public service and a partner into Congress who will be your champion and listen to you. I would be honored to serve you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you for joining us here and jumping into the ring of democracy. All righty.
Thank you, Volma.
Thank you.